Fluor has a very strong safety-driven culture, and as such, we always include a safety topic with every meeting. Stick around until the end of this video recording to hear Kapil Chawan talk about technologies that Fluor utilizes at its sites to make construction projects safer. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Today's webinar is titled Building Resilient Strategies for a Turbulent Supply Chain. Global supply chains have been pushed to the brink over the last 2 years with a series of unprecedented events unfolding one after another, from a widespread pandemic-induced lockdown to the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Our subject matter experts will share their experiences and challenges during this turbulent period that witnessed extreme volatility in commodity prices and an increasing in lead times. They'll further elaborate with a few mitigation strategies that help Fluor in creating a resilient supply chain.
So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, based on your geographical location. My name is Maneesh Gupta, and today me and Asheesh will share our experience in creating a resilient supply chain that has witnessed huge turbulence during last couple of years. We will discuss the events that caused disruption in the supply chain, which will be followed up by its impact on the equipment lead times, commodity prices, currency, and inflation. Towards the end, we will discuss few strategies that we have implemented to mitigate the risks related to price and impact on schedule. So we all know last 2 years have been bad and extremely challenging with too many unknowns, leading supply chain into a turmoil. It has been a combination of both supply constraints and sudden increase in demand. So it all started in Q2 of 2020 with coronavirus pandemic. As countries implemented necessary quarantines and social distancing practices to contain the pandemic, the world had been put in a great lockdown, putting everything to a standstill. Once spread of pandemic started flattening, economic activities resumed. Result: sudden surge in demand by December 2020. A record surge in imports to the United States and Europe from Asia stretched the global supply chain, from shipping lines, ports, and warehouses to factories, even more. Everything was unprecedented. Then came February 2020, when Storm Uri had widespread impact across United States, North Mexico, and parts of Canada. It led to major power crisis in Texas, leaving millions without power as storm led to failure of power grid and water supply. Many refineries and petrochemical plants along the Gulf coast were shut down or operated at reduced capacity. It is considered as costliest natural disaster ever recorded in the United States, with loss estimated around $200 billion. Then came 23rd March 2021. It was now the turn of another unprecedented event when the ship Ever Given got stuck in Suez Canal and the canal was blocked for 6 days. As one of the world's busiest trade routes, the canal construction had a significant negative impact on trade between Europe, Asia, and Middle East. The route accounts for about 12% of global trade, with estimated US $9.6 billion of trade each day, with 50 ships passing every day on average through the canal. It further burdened the already stretched supply chain with shipment delays, port congestions, and sharp increase in freight rates. During June-July 2021, Delta variant of coronavirus became rampant in India and other countries, resulting into another round of lockdowns and travel restrictions. It was followed up by Hurricane Ida in August 2021, which further contributed to supply disruptions. Then came issue related to shortage of semiconductors that impacted not only cars, but also and towards the end of 2021, we started feeling the impact of what we call as the Great Resignation, when an estimated 75 million workers left their job in US as per Bureau of Labor Statistics. Retaining talent became a global crisis, and industries like ours also get impacted as we face issues related to adequate engineering talent to support the execution of projects and proposals. Our suppliers and contractors too face similar issues that impacted their response times, resulting into increased bid turnaround time and resolution of issues. So when everything started opening and global economy started looking upwards, Russia-Ukraine crisis unfolded. The crisis impacted the base metal like aluminium, nickel, and steel, as Russia is net exporter of these commodities to many countries, specifically Europe. That caused turbulence in commodity market, resulting into severe price volatility and increased lead times. With sanctions on Russia, crude oil started increasing. We witnessed sudden increase in inflation in March 2022 onwards, resulting into increase in interest rates by global regulatory banks. So the unprecedented chain of events led to turmoil in supply chain that caused risk to schedule as we see delivery lead times extended significantly. So the chart on left shows suppliers delivery times in United States and Europe have hit record highs since late 2020. The IHS Market Suppliers Delivery Time Index is constructed from PMI business surveys and reflects the extent of supply chain delays. To calculate the index, purchasing managers are asked if their suppliers' delivery times are on average, slower, faster, or unchanged compared to the previous month. Readings above 50 indicate faster delivery times. Readings at 50 signals no change, and readings below 50 indicate slower delivery times compared with those of the prior month. The sharp drop in delivery time index reflects surging demand, widespread supply constraints, or a combination of both. During such times, suppliers usually have greater pricing power, causing rise in prices. Moreover, these supply chain delays can reduce the availability of intermediate goods, which combined with labor shortages can slow down production and output growth. The chart is very helpful in providing us the valuable information on developing inflation trends, escalation trends, and so on. The table on the right is more of a Fluor Global Category Managers Market Intelligence chart, wherein we have captured lead times of certain key material and equipment. It contains info about traditional or historical lead times versus current applicable lead times. You would notice an unprecedented increase in lead times of most of the equipments like transformers going up to 72 weeks. Similarly, for other categories like distributed control systems, automated valves, switch gears, we have never witnessed such equipment that we have not considered as long lead are now considered as long lead categories. Based on that, we will have to evaluate on how we put together an overall EPC project schedule, how and when we start placing purchase orders, and if we need to move certain engineering teams around it.
They started to go up as the world economy recovered. Nickel prices topped more than $100,000 per metric ton mark on March 8th of this year, and LME had to briefly halt trading. So this huge upswing was not a supply demand issue, but more of a fear factor due to the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Since then, nickel prices have cooled down significantly and are now hovering close to about $22,000 per metric ton mark. Production of stainless steel accounts for about 70% of nickel consumption, and other uses include electroplating, non-ferrous alloys, batteries, etc. And lockdowns in China have caused a slowdown in stainless steel consumption and are one of the main reasons for the drop in nickel pricing. However, nickel is still trading about 50% higher than its pre-pandemic levels. Copper is another widely used metal that has been volatile in the last couple of years. 4 months ago, copper prices hit a record high of more than $10,600 a metric ton mark. This was again just after the Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Since then, concerns about rising inflation, rising interest rates, and lockdowns in China have been driving copper and other commodities down. However, copper is still trading 30% higher than its pre-pandemic levels. In the last few months or few weeks, its copper has been showing a sideways trend. A couple key factors that will help decide the direction of copper pricing include the US and China infrastructure plans and how the property crisis in China unfolds. Another significant factor will be Chile's new constitution, as Chile accounts for 1/3 of the global copper supply. And on September 4th, Chilean citizens will have the opportunity to adopt or reject a new constitution. If that constitution is adopted, the new law of the land would have substantial implications. The base metals since 2021, long products such as beams as well as flat products such as plate and hot rolled coil have all gone up from their pre-COVID levels. In Asia, the steel prices peaked last year and started to come down, trading close to about $800 a metric ton mark. Steel prices in Europe and Americas were following a similar trend as Asia, with a drop in price in late 2021 and early 2022. But again, the Russia-Ukraine crisis caused the steel prices to spike in March this year, and prices have significantly dropped since then, and we expect. So Manish talked about the extended deliveries earlier, and part of the reason for that are the logistics constraints. There are also a major uptick in the logistics costs across the road, ocean, and the air freight categories. Fuel is a major component of the logistics cost, and bunker fuel impacts ocean freight costs just as diesel impacts trucking costs. So the chart here represents average of bunker fuel prices at major ports for three main bunker fuels: the very low sulfur fuel oil, marine gas oil, and intermediate fuel oil. As you can see, the bunker fuel prices are currently more than double than what they were in 2020 and early 2021. The World Container Index is assessed by Drewry's and is a good indicator of worldwide container shipment costs. It is based on container freight rates on 8 major routes from US, Europe, and Asia. And the index peaked in 2021 with a five-fold increase from 2020. Since then, the container prices have also dropped, but this has been on the back of demand slump and Chinese lockdowns, and the downward trend is expected to continue for the rest of the year. The Topfors Multipurpose Index is an indicator of the break bulk pricing, and this index has continued to increase since the last 3 years. And we haven't seen any signs of relenting on this index, and it continues to be a multi-year high. We do not even expect any sudden drops for the remainder of this year. So another factor that we look into is currency for understanding the global pricing trends. As you can see, the US dollar has strengthened in the last year across a range of currencies, and this is mainly because of the rising interest rates in the US. Typically, Japanese yen is a safe haven during times of uncertainty and stays stable with regards to the US dollar. However, this time around, it has dropped significantly, and this is because of Bank of Japan governor emphasizing his determination to stick with rock bottom interest rates, even if it means a weaker yen. Now, Japan's inflation rate currently is very low, and hence we may continue to see the same policy from the Bank of Japan. What that means is we will be seeing Japanese companies be more competitive in the global market. Similarly, we may see the same positive trend for the European and the Korean companies, as their currencies have weakened relatively more to others, maybe such as China here. So most of the world is currently seeing the highest inflation rates that have been seen in decades. Major economies such as the UK, US, Europe, and India are all facing inflation rates higher than 5%. Japan and China are still comparatively low and are seeing close to 2.5% inflation. However, these are still high numbers for those countries as they have seen negative inflation in the past years. So in order to bring these inflation levels down from a 40-year high, the US Federal Reserve has continued to raise interest rates, and so are some of the other countries like the European Union trying to do that. The Intercontinental Exchange maintains a US dollar inflation expectations index, and this index provides indication of expected inflation over the next year and also on a longer 5 to 10-year horizon. It is expected that the inflation dropping to 3% in 2023 from about 7% that's expected for this year, 2022. In the longer run, it is expected that inflation will be back to the 2%, 2.5% levels. So we talked about the impact of supply chain disruptions, the Russia-Ukraine crisis, and the impact of interest rates on pricing. We will now start talking about the few strategies to mitigate pricing risks that can be implemented on capital projects. So first and foremost, to mitigate the impact of pricing or any other risk, we need to keep a close tab on the supply chain market. We at Fluor have developed an in-house market dynamic spend analytics tool that helps us in better decision making. In the back end, the tool is fed with current raw material and commodity market pricing data. It utilizes Fluor historical and current market pricing. This is for the finished products. And also market intelligence metrics from our global category managers and Fluor treasury. We also utilize market forecasts from various publications such as the World Bank, IMF. So the tool has built-in empirical formulas as well as machine learning algorithms that were developed jointly with IBM Watson. The output we get provides various regions of the world based on the best available information. We use this information to develop the sourcing strategies and proposal estimates, as well as to provide benchmarking and negotiation guidance to our clients. Another mitigation to counter significant pricing volatility is to hedge those risks in the financial market. So why projects are driven by schedule, and purchasing material in a volatile market such as the last few years can have significant adverse pricing exposure. And a lot of people assume that hedging is speculation, whereas actually it is quite the opposite. It is a process of managing the known risks, and it starts with risk assessment. Based on the sourcing strategy for a project, we typically have a fair idea on the currencies and the countries we will be purchasing material from. So now the currency risk can be mitigated in a very straightforward manner to agree to get paid in those currencies or by hedging those currencies on a project. But for commodities, the adverse exposure can be mitigated by eliminating the physical purchase exposure by hedging the corresponding amount in the financial market. Commodities such as nickel, aluminum, copper have an impact on pricing of finished products such as piping, mechanical equipment, electrical equipment, cable. Similarly, fuel has an impact on logistics, construction, and subcontracts costs. So Fluor hedges and can also help clients hedge on their projects for commodities such as copper, nickel, aluminum, and fuel. Hedges are placed as per the timing and escalation clauses in the purchase orders. So any loss or gain that happens in the physical market is offset by a corresponding gain or loss in the financial market. Now let me explain that with an example. Suppose at the start of a project, it is estimated that a project will purchase 10,000 tons of stainless steel material. This accounts for about 1,000 tons of nickel on that project. Let us assume that nickel is trading at $20,000 a metric ton at the project start, and that's how you estimated the cost of the project. However, the purchase of stainless steel material will happen only after a few months once engineering has progressed and data sheets and specifications are developed. Unfortunately, it may so happen that the commodity price increases and nickel is at $30,000 a metric ton at the time of purchase. So this accounts for about a $10 million loss in the physical market. Such a risk can be mitigated by hedging through a forward contract at the start of the project. The hedge can be sold in the financial market once we make the purchase in the physical market. In this case, we will gain $10 million in the financial market and can offset the loss from the physical market. The same mitigation is applicable in a decreasing commodity market as well. In that case, the gain will be in the physical market with the corresponding loss in the financial market. The gain will happen because you would be actually buying material at a lower cost and you would be actually paying less. But in both the cases, the hedging brings price certainty at the time of placement of the hedge, which is typically done at the beginning of the project. So capital projects typically run over a course of 2 to 5 years, and this leads to EPCs and suppliers having to take the material pricing risk for a longer time frame with a lot of unknowns. And not all materials have a liquid market for financial hedging to cover those risks. Suppliers typically add a lot of contingency to cover those risks. The more volatile the market, the more contingency you have to add. And one way to avoid those significant contingencies by and share those risks with suppliers and EPCs. Fluor has utilized public indices such as CBS in Netherlands and Bureau of Labor Statistics in US for our projects. These indices are published on a monthly basis based on inputs from a wider supply base and cover a range the indices that are available for structural steel, concrete, electrical equipment, instruments, wire and cable. Suppliers can be paid based on the changes in these public indices and will not need to add contingency cost to the client. And since capital projects run and with that, I'll pass this back to Maneesh to talk about risk mitigation strategies for schedule.
So we have talked about mitigation of risks associated with increase in price and volatility. Now let's talk about what we should do for mitigating the risks related to delivery or schedule. First and the foremost is the development of reliable and large global supplier base. Fluor typically buys about $5 billion worth of equipment and material every year from more than 5,000 suppliers that are spread globally. This helps us in leveraging our buying power to reduce supply chain cost and schedule risks. This is the snapshot of geographical locations from where we buy regularly. We have suppliers across the globe to support our regional and strategic requirements from Americas to Asia Pacific. Further, we have more than 1,000 supply chain professionals across the globe to manage the quality and timely delivery of these materials and equipment from these suppliers to job sites. These professionals work seamlessly with suppliers right from material planning to receipt at site using our homegrown tool, Material Manager, or what we call MATMAN. MATMAN allows Fluor to integrate all procurement and material management functions into one seamless system that supports providing the right material at the right time to the right place throughout the project lifecycle. We have been expanding the suppliers further for certain category of equipment to achieve resilience in our supply chain. We give specific focus on expanding our regional supply base to cater the regional requirements and to safeguard ourselves from any disruption like lockdowns, geopolitical crisis, and sanctions. So long lead items, which we also call LLIs, are always critical in successful execution of a project. Early identification of LLI is even more critical. This is done by collaborating between various disciplines, including engineering, construction, and logistics, and of course, potential suppliers. Speaking with suppliers offer the opportunity for early vendor data to support modeling and construction, as well as identifying opportunities to secure shop space along with development of schedule risk mitigating strategies. We have been closely collaborating with the engineering and supply base for finding innovative solutions. This is an example where a long lead item was required to be fabricated in less than a year, but raw material lead time was taking it much beyond the required timeline. We collaborated with the engineering and suppliers who provided us the options of plate standard sizes and thicknesses that were available quicker and also are available in stock. Based on that information, engineering created a catalog of sizing options and equipment was designed using those options, which helped in significant reduction in lead time. Similar example where we work with a module yard. The table on the left-hand side provides an example of the information we receive from the supplier related to weekly rolling schedule for different shapes and sections. It contains the information about targeted capacity and also the capacity that is booked. Considering the rolling schedule of mills for different shapes and sections along with the logistics lead time, we were able to work with engineering to design the module based on the available sections and schedule. Such innovative solution requires a lot of support from engineering, suppliers, and clients. Close collaboration between all stakeholders helped in mitigating such risks, like in both cases, we helped project mitigate the schedule risk. Another thing we have been doing regularly is to develop frame agreements for potential bulk material to be purchased based on engineering specifications. This helps in avoiding multiple RFQ process cycle and saves significant time. This also provides visibility to a supplier on the quantum of material and schedule for better shop allocation and planning. It further provides price and schedule certainty to the client. If it is a long project, we can consider building a price escalation clause for mitigating the risk of price volatility. Frame agreements help in early finalization of award as they are finalized much earlier than the design is completed, with early collaboration with engineering for developing initial broad MTO. Broader MTO further provides flexibility and choice to engineering based on lead times. These are actual examples of remote visual inspection that we carried on recent projects when our regular field inspectors were unable to visit supplier shops for carrying out inspection activities due to COVID lockdown. It helped us in mitigating any schedule delay for not meeting the inspection requirements. We have performed all type of non-destructive testing through remote visual inspection, right from raw material identification to factory acceptance test. These pictures are few examples of recently executed jobs by various fabricators and how we collaborated with them in mitigating schedule risk due to supply chain disruption. First is related to spool fabrication, second is related to fabrication of heaters, and third is related to fabrication of flares by different suppliers at different locations for multiple projects. We deputed shop expediter who worked very closely with the fabricator and floor project team. He proactively resolved the issues before it became a bottleneck. Some of the schedule lost on account of COVID lockdown was recovered by incentivizing the fabricator who agreed for incentive-linked delivery schedule and provided increased resources, whether shop space or workers. Regular material planning reports were generated using Matman to identify the shorts based on the required priorities, and material was sourced from other fabrication yards, alternate sources, or expedited to ensure timely availability of material. Last but not the least, we have a flagship program on supplier relations led by our Chief Procurement Officer based out of Houston. A dedicated team is in place to work on suppliers relation. Our relationships with our supply base allows us to get better cost and schedule certainty for our clients. As we collaborate closely with the suppliers on regular basis, irrespective of the project, issues get resolved on priority. These relationships are managed at corporate level and not are limited to relations and helps client in leveraging the relationships with those suppliers. Under this flagship program, we categorize suppliers under different classifications. The suppliers where we undergo significant spend, we maintain strategic relationship with those suppliers. We have executive level relations with them who meet regularly, discuss and collaborate to find a solution. Then we have another classification which we call evaluated suppliers. These are the suppliers where we do lot of repeat business and they have performed well in our projects. We have global category managers assigned to each supplier who maintains the relationship with them. The last one is pre-qualified suppliers, which are established players in their own country or region, and we assess their techno-commercial capabilities under pre-qualification program, where we do a desktop audit and a detailed shop audit before pre-qualifying them for a proposal or a project. So this is our way of developing a resilient supply chain by having a robust and widespread supplier base. With this, we have come to an end of our presentation. Thanks a lot for hearing us patiently.
Thank you, Asheesh, Maneesh, and Kapil for that presentation. Let's take a moment to address the questions we've received from the audience. The first question I'll address to Asheesh. It's in regard to slide number 20. With the ocean freight costs still at all-time highs, should we focus more on the domestic supply market?
Thanks, Brent. So we always look at the landed cost for any purchase order. While developing the bidders list, we review the global supply landscape, and that always includes domestic suppliers as well. And while we have seen ocean freight costs increase over the last few years, we are seeing some reduction in container freight in last few quarters now. And another factor we are seeing is that the US domestic market had high inflation and the US dollar had strengthened. So the competitiveness of the US domestic market has not really improved relative to the global landscape. So for example, we'll still be seeing Middle East to be a lower cost for sourcing fabricated steel for US projects. So in a sense, for any purchase order, we will look at global landscape, and the freight is obviously a component for that, but we are not really seeing a significant shift in the competitiveness. Now, there may be other reasons for schedule or for having more certainty on the project to look at a domestic supply base, but pricing is not really making a significant shift at this point in time.
Okay, thank you for that. The next question, which of the supply chain issues that you mentioned seem to be getting resolved?
Yeah, okay. So I feel the worst is behind us. However, still I feel there are certain issues like Russia-Ukraine crisis, rise in inflation, semiconductor shortage, or shortage of manpower. It will take some time to get stabilized or get resolved. So what I foresee is that it will probably end of 2023 as well, specifically if I talk about semiconductors. So, but at the same time, I am seeing like the major issue which was earlier existing, like port congestion. So that appears to be getting resolved. So now it has become more related to price rather than schedule.
Okay, thank you. Next question again for Maneesh. This is in regard to slide 32. Can the escalation and de-escalation clauses you mentioned in the frame agreements be used on all purchase orders or contracts?
So again, it depends. For global frame agreements which we are executing, like for pipes, fittings, flanges, cables, we are building those type of escalation clauses in our frame agreements, and we have the go-bys available with us.
All right, thank you. Next question, with nickel and copper coming back down, are we seeing immediate effects on finished goods pricing, such as pipe, cable, vessels, etc.?
Yes, because typically we nickel and copper have a direct correlation, and many of the suppliers have a clause for nickel and copper price escalation, copper for cable and electrical equipment, and nickel mostly for stainless steel and mechanical equipment. So yeah, with them going down, now we are going to see a drop in the pricing for finished products.
Okay, great, thank you. discussions of possible recession in Europe and potentially the US intensifying, how do we expect this to affect the supply base, and how are mitigations against these risks?
So, see, it is still difficult to assess whether we are actually into recession or not. But yes, if there is, so what is the current reason of whatever escalations or disruptions happening? So one is this sudden surge in demand. So obviously, if there is a recession in US or Europe, the demand is likely to get reduced, but still I would say it will take a lot of time, because in my slide I have shown that how lead times have increased, so shops are overbooked, and it will take some time for those shops to to deliver the orders. So I don't feel it is the situation is going to improve quite sooner.
Okay, thank you. Does Fluor hedge on every project that it executes? If not, which projects are candidates for hedging?
So Fluor definitely hedges on projects where we have the risk, and we typically start looking into that on the projects before we even submit an EPC bid, whether we need to hedge and what commodities do we need to hedge. We work closely with our treasury and engineering. So it's a multidiscipline effort that goes into the plan for hedge and covering the risk. So hedging is one of the risk mitigation strategies as part of our business risk mitigation framework. And we typically hedge on, or at least evaluate the hedging possibility on all the projects where we will have the risk. Now, there may be cases, and there are many commodities for which we do not have a liquid market, and the risk still stays. So it may so happen on a project that we have a commodity where we are not able to hedge, but the evaluation definitely is done. Now, in many projects, the risk is not entirely ours, and it is the risk is on the client side, and they have their own treasury look into it. And we, as Fluor, provide them support in terms of quantification of the quantities, the timing of purchase orders, and things like that, to help them make a better decision on going for the hedge or not.
Okay, thank you. Another question: from shipping congestion, raw materials escalation, reduced workforce availability, surging demand, and other supply chain constraints, which is likely to get resolved first?
Okay, so what I feel is that the congestions at the airport, at the seaport, which I mentioned initially, so that is likely to get, or rather I would say that it has already been resolved. For other issues, it will still linger on for some more time. And like I mentioned, for semiconductors, it is likely to linger on maybe till middle of 2023 or so on.
Okay, thank you. I think we might have already answered this one in another way, but I'll ask it. This one came through and is worded a little differently. So this one's for Asheesh. Continuing Russia-Ukraine crisis is likely to impact energy security and costs, specifically for the European manufacturers and fabricators. How do you expect that to impact purchasing decisions and possible mitigations?
And I think we kind of talked a little bit about looking at any purchasing decisions from a global landscape or supply landscape perspective. So in this case also, we are seeing the concerns. We are also seeing clients and suppliers prepare for it, for a potential supplier. Then you just need to build in a little bit more of a contingency in terms of your schedule. But at this point in time, we're not really debarring or not looking into any European supply base as such, just adding some more contingency around it and taking from there.
Okay, thank you. Next question is for Maneesh, and it's in regard to slide 32. Do you consider global frame agreements for multiple projects, even if the clients and project locations are different?
Okay, so generally we do frame agreements on project to project basis, as frame agreements are highly dependent on technical requirements, and that varies from project to project. But having said that, if there are requirements and we can easily leverage our existing frame agreement and the relationships to expand it to multiple projects and multiple clients.
All right, thank you. I'll address this one to Maneesh also. That were discussed. If so, is there a specific region that you're focusing on?
So it is a continuous process within Fluor. We are continuously expanding our supply base. So, we are facing currently the issues related to lead times of transformers, switch gears, so those type of equipments. So currently we are trying to identify these regional suppliers who can help us in mitigating the schedule risks for these type of items. So the supplier requalification program which we have, that is specifically addressed for those type of requirements, where we keep on looking for these type of suppliers who are actually established players in their own regions, and they help us in mitigating the risks or and the disruptions, like sometimes we get anti-dumping duties levied, lockdowns, so those type of risks can be mitigated by those.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Maneesh, and this relates to slide 29. How are tariffs and duties impacting the sourcing of items from Far East and China for items such as modules?
So, per se, in a module, I don't feel that there is a duty, but yes, there are, there are inputs within the module, which, like pipe rack, there are duties which becomes applicable in countries like US. So before, identifying and before the formation of a strategy, we do consider all those type of aspects. So if there are tariffs like anti-dumping duty and CVD, so we take that into consideration, and if there are certain duties applicable, so we look for the alternate sources.
Okay, thank you. It looks like that's about all the time we'll have today for questions. Again, thank you, Asheesh and Maneesh, for that great presentation. To our audience, we'd like to thank you for attending today. It's been a pleasure being your moderator.
Hello everyone. At Fluor, health, safety and environment, or commonly known as HSE, is a core value, fundamental to how we do business and is an essential component of our business strategy. Our goal is to minimize environmental impacts and protect our employees, subcontractors, and activities. Construction is one of the world's most challenging industries. Teams often work in harsh conditions, carry large objects, and operate heavy machinery. The various heavy machinery and equipment, power tools, countless workers, and structures usually pose life-threatening hazards such as falling objects, unsafe scaffolds, unsafe lifting operations, unsafe working platforms, overloaded vehicles and forklifts, etc. There is no doubt that safety in construction has improved by leaps and bounds over the past decade, but there is still a large percentage of accidents that could have been prevented either via proper safety training or by the use of appropriate equipment. In the upcoming few slides, we will look at two supply chain technologies that are being used at Fluor sites that make work at our construction sites safer. Number one is drones. Industrial-grade drone models are nowadays coming with precise controls, computer vision, object avoidance flight planning, GPS capabilities, geofencing, and artificial intelligence, which make them capable of performing a wide range of roles that were previously considered labor-intensive and time-consuming. For example, material identification. Compared to a time-consuming round trip done by a field material manager, a drone can regularly update the material location in almost a fraction of a time. Another example, logistics movement planning. Construction sites are very dynamic, and drones can be utilized to take photographs of construction progress to create built-in models that can keep logistics manager informed of the changing site conditions, which he or she can use to upgrade the material movement paths if required, or inform the construction manager to clear the route if possible. Drones not only help us in work process improvement at the site, but they also make our site safer. For example, inspection at heights. Inspection at heights are usually costly and a safety concern, putting the workers at risk. Drones make construction sites inspection safer, since using drones, the inspection can be performed remotely while the workers stay safely on the ground. Safety on a construction site is also about securing the construction compound. Drone images can help locate a perimeter breach, preventing civilian entry and potential accidents. Drones, using their sensors, can monitor various aspects of construction site, such as noise levels, temperature, and volatile organic compounds. Data or reading collected using drones can alert the safety manager promptly whenever there is a significant risk. Next, we have telematics solution. Telematics is a combination of telecommunication and informatics. Telematics is a quickly growing trend across the equipment industry. This technology uses cellular or GPS signals to monitor and track key utilization and safety information for a variety of vehicles and heavy equipment units, making it a key differentiator in site and fleet management operations. One of the main benefits of telematics is the ability to improve equipment utilization through automated reporting. The system monitors a variety of indicators, including idle time, fuel consumption, engine hours, equipment usage, and maintenance alerts. The team can obtain a full picture of the fleet and make adjustments to maximize productivity and optimize costs through these reports. Telematics promotes safe equipment and vehicle operation through reporting around several leading indicators such as speeding, harsh acceleration, aggressive braking, also serve as a tool to recognize safe drivers or identify opportunities for training and coaching. In addition to safe operation, the telematics offering provides additional safety and security benefits in the field. This includes tracking the after-hour movement of equipment and vehicles, as well as the option to add sensor to truck doors that help prevent theft and maintain cargo security. Panic buttons can also be added to operator key fobs, enabling employees to call for help in emergency regardless of the location. With the help of these technologies, we are making our construction sites safer and more productive. In the end, I would like to say that no work is so urgent that we can